We are going to start with one of the biggest stories we have been following for over a week now, and that is the escalating situation over in the Middle East. Bringing us out to this, it's a live image that we have in Tel Aviv over in Israel, as I read some of the latest reporting courtesy of the Associated Press.
Thank you for having me on.
So I did give a bit of a recap there right off the top of some of the things that we had been following for the last several hours. What really stuck out to you, and what
that Iran's oil belonged to the people of Iran. For decades, a British company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which later became BP, yes, the same BP you know today, had been extracting Iran's oil and paying Iran almost nothing in return. The profits were enormous. The British were getting rich, and Iran, one of the most oil-rich nations on earth, was poor. Mossadegh stood up. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. He said, simply and clearly, "This oil belongs to us." And the world applauded. Time magazine named him Man of the Year in 1951. The Iranian people loved him. He was a symbol of hope. And then America and Britain destroyed him. In August of 1953, the CIA and Britain's MI6 launched a covert operation called Operation Ajax, known in Britain as Operation Boot. They paid Iranian street gangs to riot. They bribed military officers. They spread propaganda. They manufactured chaos. And within days, they overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran. They reinstalled the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a king who would do whatever America and Britain told him to do. A king who gave the oil contracts back to Western companies. A king who built a brutal secret police force called Savak, which tortured and killed thousands of Iranian citizens who dared to oppose him. For 26 years, the Shah ruled Iran with an iron fist, backed completely by American money, American weapons, and American silence about the atrocities being committed. The Iranian people did not forget. They never forgot. And in 1979, they exploded. The revolution that rewrote history, 1979, January 16th, 1979. The Shah of Iran flees the country. He escapes on a plane, sick, broken, and abandoned, even by the Americans who had propped him up for decades. As his plane disappears into the sky, millions of Iranians pour into the streets of Tehran, screaming with joy. 2 weeks later, a 79-year-old man with a long white beard descends from a plane that had flown from Paris. His name is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He had been living in exile, but he had never stopped speaking. His voice, recorded on cassette tapes, yes, cassette tapes, had been smuggled into Iran for years, spreading his message to millions. The crowd that greeted Khomeini at Tehran's airport that day was one of the largest in human history. Estimates suggest between 3 and 5 million people lined the streets. They wept. They screamed. They believed, genuinely believed, that God himself had sent this man to save them. Khomeini did not disappoint, at least not at first. He spoke of justice. He spoke of freedom from imperialism. He spoke of a government that served the people, not foreign powers. And when he said that America was the great Satan, millions of Iranians cheered, because for them, after 1953, after the Shah, after Savak, America was not a hero. America was the villain. In November of 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran. They took 52 American diplomats hostage. They held them for 444 days. In America, people were furious. They saw it as an act of terrorism. In Iran, people saw it as justice, as payback for 1953, for the Shah, for decades of humiliation. Two countries, two completely different truths, and both of them real. That is the tragedy at the heart of this conflict. It is not simply good versus evil. It is wound versus wound, anger meeting anger. And between the millions of ordinary people, both American and Iranian, who want nothing more than to live in peace. The war America pretends it didn't start in 1980 to 1988. Here is something the mainstream media rarely, if ever, discusses in depth. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. Saddam Hussein, yes, the same Saddam Hussein that America would later call a monster and hang, launched a massive military assault on Iranian territory. The war that followed was one of the bloodiest conflicts since World War II. It lasted 8 years. It killed between 1 and 2 million people. Entire cities were destroyed. Children were sent to walk through minefields. Chemical weapons were used on a massive scale. America supported Iraq. The United States provided Saddam Hussein's government with intelligence, satellite imagery, economic aid, military equipment, and diplomatic cover. Even as American officials knew that Iraq was using chemical weapons against Iranian soldiers and Kurdish civilians. Donald Rumsfeld, who would later become George W. Bush's Secretary of Defense, flew to Baghdad in 1983 and shook Saddam Hussein's hand. The photographs exist. They are in the historical record. America helped the man who was gassing Iranian soldiers. When the war finally ended in 1988, Iran was shattered. Hundreds of thousands of their sons were dead. Their economy was destroyed. Their cities were in ruins. And the country that had helped cause all of that suffering was America. Then, just 2 months before the war ended, on July 3rd, 1988, an American naval ship called the USS Vincennes shot down an Iranian civilian passenger jet. Iran Air Flight 655. 290 people were on board. They were all killed. The U.S. government said it was an accident. They later gave the ship's commander a medal. Iran called it murder. No apology was ever issued. No accountability was taken. The families of the 290 people who died received a settlement payment, but no admission of guilt. Can you imagine what that feels like? Can you understand, even for a moment, why Iran looks at America the way it does? The nuclear obsession, 1990s to 2015. After the Iran-Iraq War, Iran made a decision. Never again would they be this vulnerable. Never again would a foreign power be able to destroy them so easily. They needed leverage. They needed something that would make the world think twice before crossing them. They chose the nuclear path. Now here is where the story becomes incredibly complicated and incredibly important. Iran has always maintained officially and consistently that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes: energy, medical research, scientific development. And under international law, they have every right to pursue civilian nuclear technology. America and Israel have never believed them. The fear, and it is a real fear, not a manufactured one, is that Iran is using its civilian nuclear program as a cover to develop nuclear weapons. And given the rhetoric that has come from Iranian leadership over the decades, the statements about Israel, the chance of death to America, that fear has real weight. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Iran quietly expanded its nuclear infrastructure. They built centrifuges. They enriched uranium. They constructed facilities deep underground, so deep that even the most powerful conventional bombs could not destroy them. And America watched. and worried and threatened and sanctioned. Sanctions are economic weapons. America used them like a sledgehammer against Iran. They cut Iran off from the international banking system. They blocked Iran's oil exports. They froze Iranian assets around the world. The goal was to make the Iranian economy hurt so badly that the government would be forced to give up its nuclear ambitions. What happened instead was fascinating and tragic. The Iranian people suffered enormously. Inflation skyrocketed. Jobs disappeared. Medicine became scarce. Ordinary Iranian, not the government, not the Revolutionary Guard, but teachers and doctors and students and farmers paid the price. But the government did not collapse. The nuclear program did not stop. Because here is the truth about sanctions that politicians in Washington often ignore. When you make an entire people suffer, they don't turn against their government. They turn against you. The deal, the hope, and the betrayal. 2015 to 2018. In 2015, something remarkable happened. After years of secret negotiations, Iran and 6 world powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China, signed an agreement called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. Under this deal, Iran agreed to dramatically limit its nuclear activities, allow unprecedented international inspections, and accept strict controls on its uranium enrichment program. In exchange, the international community would lift the crushing economic sanctions that had been strangling Iran for decades. It was imperfect. Critics on both sides had legitimate complaints, but it was real. It was working. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, confirmed multiple times that Iran was complying with the terms of the agreement. For a brief moment, it seemed like the decades of hostility might finally begin to ease. And then came 2018. President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. He called it the worst deal ever negotiated. He reimposed sanctions, even more severe than before. He added new sanctions on top of old ones. He called it maximum pressure. The rest of the world was stunned. America's European allies, Britain, France, Germany, tried to salvage the deal. They begged Washington to reconsider. Iran, furious at the betrayal, began slowly rolling back its own commitments to the deal, arguing that if America wasn't going to honor its side, why should Iran honor its side? The nuclear program began expanding again, faster this time, more openly defiant. The window of diplomacy that had taken years to pry open was slammed shut.
The assassination that changed everything, January 2020. January 3rd, 2020, Baghdad International Airport. A convoy of cars moves through the night. Inside one of those cars is General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Quds Force, the most powerful military figure in Iran after the supreme leader himself. He is considered a hero by millions of Iranians and a terrorist by Washington. An American drone strike kills him. Along with him die several other Iranian and Iraqi military figures. The world holds its breath. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, appears on television weeping openly. He promises severe revenge. On the streets of Tehran, millions gather for Soleimani's funeral, the largest funeral procession in Iranian history. Hundreds of people are killed in the crush of the crowd. Days later, Iran fires over a dozen ballistic missiles at American military bases in Iraq. It is the first time Iran has directly attacked American forces in decades. Miraculously, there are no American deaths. Iran apparently gave advance warning through diplomatic channels to avoid escalation. But the message was unmistakable. Iran was no longer willing to absorb American pressure without responding directly. The world had just witnessed something it had not seen in a very long time. Iran striking back at America, openly, on the world stage, and daring America to respond. Trump chose not to escalate further, but the relationship between Tehran and Washington had crossed a threshold it could never uncross. The proxy war machine. While the direct confrontations get the headlines, the real war between Iran and America has been fought in the shadows for decades. Iran has built what military analysts call the axis of resistance, a network of allied militant groups spread across the Middle East that serves as Iran's forward military force and deterrence strategy. Think of it as a distributed military, one that Iran can activate, support, and guide without ever officially declaring war. Hezbollah in Lebanon is perhaps the most powerful non-state military force in the world. Trained, armed, and funded by Iran, Hezbollah has fought Israel multiple times and has tens of thousands of rockets pointed at Israeli cities. Hamas in Gaza has received Iranian weapons and training. The October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, the deadliest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, was carried out by Hamas. Iran denies direct involvement in planning the attack, but the weapons, the money, the training, much of it traces back to Tehran. The Houthis in Yemen have been attacking Saudi Arabian infrastructure, American naval vessels, and international shipping routes in the Red Sea, disrupting global trade on a massive scale. Iran supports the Houthis with weapons, intelligence, and logistics. Shia militias in Iraq have fired rockets at American bases hundreds of times over the past several years. From America's perspective, this is Iran waging a war against American interests across an entire region without ever officially pulling the trigger itself. From Iran's perspective, it is the only rational response to American military dominance. They cannot match America's conventional military power, but they can make American power expensive, unpredictable, and exhausting. It is brilliant and terrifying at the same time. Israel, the wild card that changes everything. No analysis of the Iran-USA conflict is complete without understanding the role of Israel. Israel views a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, not a strategic threat, not a diplomatic problem, but a threat to the very existence of the Jewish state. When Iranian leaders make statements about Israel, when they fund Hamas and Hezbollah, when they develop ballistic missiles that can reach Tel Aviv, Israel does not interpret that as political posturing. They interpret it as a promise. For decades, Israel has conducted a shadow war against Iran's nuclear program. Israeli intelligence is believed to be responsible for the assassinations of multiple Iranian nuclear scientists, brilliant men who were shot, bombed, or killed in mysterious accidents. Iranian centrifuges were sabotaged by a computer virus called Stuxnet, one of the most sophisticated cyber weapons ever created, believed to have been jointly developed by the United States and Israel. These operations set Iran's nuclear program back by years. But they also hardened Iranian resolve. In April 2024, something unprecedented happened. Iran launched a direct military attack on Israeli territory, firing over 300 drones and missiles in a single night. It was the first time Iran had ever attacked Israel directly, outside of proxy forces. Israel's air defenses, with help from the United States, Jordan, and other regional partners, intercepted the vast majority of the projectiles. The physical damage was minimal, but the psychological impact was enormous. A line had been crossed. Iran had shown that it was willing to engage in direct military confrontation. Israel responded with a strike on Iranian air defense systems, a surgical demonstration that Israeli aircraft could penetrate Iranian airspace undetected. The message from both sides was clear. We are no longer hiding. We are no longer playing by the old rules. The nuclear countdown. This is perhaps the most important chapter of this entire story, and it is the one that should worry you most. Right now, as you watch this video, Iran is closer to having a nuclear weapon than it has ever been before. According to assessments from the International Atomic Energy Agency and multiple Western intelligence services, Iran has enriched uranium to 60% purity, just a technical step away from the 90% needed for a nuclear weapon. They have enough enriched uranium stockpile that experts estimate they could produce the fissile material for a nuclear bomb in perhaps 1 to 2 weeks, what analysts call a breakout time. That does not mean they have a nuclear bomb. Building a working nuclear weapon requires additional steps: weaponization, miniaturization, delivery systems. That process could take months or longer. But the gap between where Iran is now and where they need to be is narrower than it has ever been. And here is the chilling part. Even Iran's closest allies do not know exactly how far the program has advanced. The deep underground facilities at Fordo and Natanz are among the most heavily protected installations on the planet. Satellite imagery can see the surface. It cannot see what is happening 100 meters below the ground. American intelligence officials have, in recent years, revised their assessments of Iran's nuclear timeline, and the revisions have consistently moved in one direction: sooner, faster, more advanced than we thought. Israel has made clear, publicly and repeatedly, that it will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Full stop. No exceptions, no negotiations. They have said they will take military action to prevent it, even without American support. America has said it has a policy of never allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But America has also, in practice, been reluctant to commit to military action. That gap between Israeli urgency and American hesitation is where wars are born. The sanctions war and Iran's survival strategy. Despite decades of the most severe economic sanctions ever imposed on a country outside of wartime, Iran has not collapsed. It has not surrendered. It has adapted. How? Iran has built what economists call a sanctions-resistant economy. Not because sanctions don't hurt, they do, enormously, but because Iran has found creative ways to survive. China has become Iran's economic lifeline. Beijing buys Iranian oil at discounted prices, ignoring American secondary sanctions, financial penalties imposed on companies that do business with Iran. The trade between Iran and China has grown enormously in recent years. Russia, particularly after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, has drawn closer to Iran. The two countries have developed military cooperation. Iran has supplied Russia with Shahed drones that have been used extensively in the war against Ukraine. In return, Russia has provided Iran with advanced military technology. Iran has also developed its own domestic military-industrial complex, manufacturing its own drones, missiles, and weapon systems at a scale and sophistication that has genuinely surprised Western analysts. The Shahed 136 drone, cheap, slow, and packed with explosives, has become one of the most impactful weapons in modern warfare. Costing perhaps $20,000 to manufacture, it can be produced in massive numbers and used to overwhelm air defense systems that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build. Ukraine knows this better than anyone. Iran has effectively turned its military disadvantage into an asymmetric advantage. You cannot outspend Iran in a conventional arms race because Iran isn't competing in that race. It has invented its own game, and it is winning it. The people caught in the middle. In all of this, the politics, the weapons, the sanctions, the proxy wars, it is easy to forget that there are human beings on both sides of this conflict who have done nothing wrong. Iran is a nation of 90 million people. The median age is around 32 years old. The majority of the population is young, educated, and desperate for a different future. Polls conducted by Western organizations consistently show that most Iranians, particularly the young, admire Western culture, dream of economic opportunity, and have complicated, often critical feelings about their own government. The 2022 protests in Iran, sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman who died in the custody of Iran's morality police, showed the world a different face of Iran. Young women burning their hijabs in the street. University students chanting for freedom. A generation that was willing to risk imprisonment, beatings, and death for the right to live as they chose. The Iranian government cracked down brutally. Hundreds were killed. Thousands were arrested. But the movement did not disappear. It went underground. It is still there, waiting. And then there are Americans. Ordinary Americans who have no hostility toward the Iranian people, who know, when they stop to think about it, that the vast majority of Iranians are not their enemies. The conflict between governments is real. The conflict between peoples is manufactured. And that is the most important truth in this entire story. What is happening right now? The situation between Iran and the United States in 2025 and into 2026 has reached a level of tension that is genuinely unprecedented in recent memory. Trump, back in office since January 2025, has reinstituted and intensified the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. New sanctions have been added. American naval presence in the Persian Gulf and surrounding waters has increased. Military exercises in the region have become more frequent and more visible, a deliberate message of deterrence. Iran, for its part, has continued to advance its nuclear program. It has continued to support its proxy network. The Houthis, despite sustained American and British airstrikes in Yemen, have not stopped their attacks on Red Sea shipping. They have actually expanded their operations, targeting ships from more countries and at greater distances. Iran and Russia have deepened their military cooperation. Iranian drone production has scaled up dramatically. There are reports, unconfirmed but credible, that Iran has received Russian assistance with its ballistic missile program in exchange for the drones supplied to Russia. Diplomatic channels between Washington and Tehran are essentially frozen. The two countries do not speak directly. Everything goes through intermediaries, most often Oman, a small but remarkably skilled diplomatic actor that has served as a back channel between Iran and America for decades. Both sides are building. Both sides are warning. Both sides are watching each other with a mixture of fear and calculation. The question that every intelligence agency, every diplomatic think tank, and every serious analyst in the world is asking right now is not whether a confrontation is possible. It is whether a confrontation can still be avoided. The three scenarios that keep world leaders awake at night. Scenario 1. The miscalculation. History is full of wars that no one intended to start. World War I began with an assassination that spiraled out of control through a series of rigid alliances and miscommunications. The most dangerous path to war between Iran and America is not a deliberate decision by either side. It is an accident. An Iranian drone strikes an American ship. An American missile kills an Iranian general. A proxy attack goes further than intended. One miscalculation leads to a response, which leads to a counter-response, and suddenly two countries that neither wanted war nor planned for it find themselves inside one. Scenario 2, the Israeli strike. Israel has conducted long-range military strikes before, most famously the 1981 strike on Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor and the 2007 strike on a suspected Syrian nuclear facility. Both times, the world was shocked. Both times, Israel acted without waiting for international permission. An Israeli airstrike on Iranian nuclear facilities would almost certainly trigger an Iranian military response against Israel, American assets in the region, and potentially trigger a confrontation with American forces, whether Washington wants it or not. America would likely be pulled into a war it did not choose. Scenario 3, the Iranian bomb. Iran tests a nuclear device, or intelligence confirms they have assembled one. The entire strategic calculus of the Middle East changes overnight. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, all countries that have expressed interest in nuclear capabilities, accelerate their own programs. The Non-Proliferation Treaty effectively collapses in the region. America faces a choice it has desperately tried to avoid: accept a nuclear Iran or go to war. Neither option is good. All three of these scenarios are real. None of them are inevitable. All of them are closer than they were 5 years ago. The oil weapon and the world economy. Here is something that does not get enough attention in mainstream coverage. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. At its narrowest point, it is about 33 kilometers wide. And through that 33-kilometer wide strait flows approximately 20% of the world's oil supply, every single day. Iran controls the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran decided to close the strait, through mines, through naval blockades, through missile strikes on tankers, the economic consequences would be felt immediately and catastrophically across the entire world. Oil prices would spike to levels never seen before. Supply chains would collapse. Economies that depend on affordable energy would be devastated. Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz many times over the decades. They have never actually done it, because they know it would almost certainly trigger an overwhelming American military response. But the threat alone has moved oil markets every time it has been made. This is why America keeps carrier battle groups in the Persian Gulf. This is why the United States' Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain. This is why America has spent trillions of dollars maintaining military presence in a region on the other side of the world. It is not just about Iran. It is not just about Israel. It is about the arteries of the global economy. It is about the flow of energy that keeps the lights on in Tokyo, London, and New York. When you understand this, you understand why America, regardless of which party is in power, regardless of what the president says in speeches, will never fully disengage from this region. What nobody tells you about the future. The future of the Iran-USA conflict is not predetermined. It is not written. History is not a movie with a fixed ending. It is a series of choices made by human beings under enormous pressure, with incomplete information, and with the constant possibility of both tragedy and redemption. There is a path to de-escalation. It is narrow, it is difficult, and it requires courage from leaders on both sides. It requires Iran to make real, verifiable commitments on its nuclear program. It requires America to acknowledge its historical role in creating this conflict, including 1953, including the Iran-Iraq War, including the broken promises of the nuclear deal. It requires both sides to accept that the other is not going to disappear, and that the choice is between painful compromise and endless conflict. That path exists. Diplomats know it exists. Scholars know it exists. Former military officials on both sides know it exists. The question is whether the political will exists to walk it. Right now, looking honestly at the situation in 2026, that political will is very difficult to find. The hardliners in Tehran have used American hostility to justify their grip on power for 40 years. American politicians have used Iranian hostility to win elections, sell weapons, and justify military budgets for just as long. The conflict has become, in a dark and cynical way, useful for those in power on both sides. The ones who bear the cost are the ordinary people. The Iranian mother who can't get medicine for her child because of sanctions. The American soldier deployed for the 4th time to a region he didn't choose. The Yemeni child caught in the crossfire of a war between powers he has never met. The truth you were never meant to know. You have now heard a story that mainstream media rarely tells in full. Not because the individual facts are secret, they are all in the historical record, in declassified documents, in academic journals, in the words of people who were there. But because the full story, told together, in sequence, without political spin, challenges narratives that very powerful people on both sides need you to believe. They need you to believe that this is simple: good versus evil, freedom versus tyranny. They need you to believe that the other side is incomprehensible, that their anger is irrational, that their fears are manufactured, that their humanity is less real than your own. The truth is harder than that, and more important. Iran and America are two proud, ancient, complicated civilizations locked in a conflict that neither people truly chose and that both peoples would gladly escape if their leaders would let them. The Iranian people are not America's enemy. The American people are not Iran's enemy. The enemies are ignorance, pride, and the political convenience of perpetual hostility. You now know the untold truth. What you do with it is up to you. If this video opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, share it. Not because of an algorithm, but because truth in a world full of noise is the most radical thing you can offer. And if you want to go deeper, subscribe, because this is just the beginning.